Other people on the plane, as they saw this man was there, they stopped him and they were like, oh my gosh. The pilot came out. Recently, I've been reading books by a man named Arthur Brooks. Arthur Brooks is he's a sociologist and an author, clearly. One of his books is called From Strength to Strength. And in this book, he starts the whole thing by talking about how he's on a plane at one point, I think going from LA to DC, is this overnight flight. And he's doing his work, but in the middle of this flight, he hears this elderly woman behind him talking to her husband. And she says these words that just got his attention. She says to him, "It's not true that no one needs you anymore." And as this man was talking, he was expressing this sense of like, I might as well be dead. I'm at this point in my life, and he's roughly 80, somewhere in his 80s. At this point in his life, he's like, I might as well be dead. No one needs you. No one needs me anymore. I'm washed up. I'm burned out. My life is over, essentially. My life is meaningless now. And here's his wife just trying to convince him. So here's Arthur Brooks. He's sitting there, and he said, I'm trying not to eavesdrop, but it's really compelling, this conversation. And so when they land, the lights turn on, and he gets up expecting to find this, husk of a man, this kind of like this shell of a person who's broken. He turns around and he says, I looked at this man, I'm like, I knew him. Well, he didn't know him, he was famous. He was a man that, even for Arthur Brooks, as a child, he admired this man. In fact, other people on the plane, as they saw this man was there, they stopped him and they were like, oh my gosh. The pilot came out from the cockpit and actually stopped this man and told him that ever since the pilot was a child, this man had been his hero. And Arthur Brooks was just compelled by this and said, what is it that 20 minutes ago this man was saying, my life might as well be over, but as soon as they land and people recognize him, his life has value now, this kind of this sense. And so that started Arthur Brooks. This is about maybe 12 years ago. This experience happened in 2012. It started Arthur Brooks on this journey of examining, like, how do we manage decline? Like, especially for those people who strive, those people who go after greatness in their lives. People who work really, really hard and they say, okay, I'm going to accomplish something. And in fact, as I mentioned last week our students had finals week, and so many of them graduated just yesterday. And this recognition of so many of them are going off, and they're going off to do what? They're going off to do something great, because that's what we want to do. Every one of us, we want to do something great with our lives. But at some point, no matter how great we become, at some point, no matter how accomplished we are, at some point, no matter how much good we do, we hit this place of decline. And that's what Arthur Brooks' book is about, from strength to strength. What happens when you get to this place of decline? Because that reality of decline happens to all of us. In some people, they think, and Arthur Brooks talks about this, some people think like, no, I'm going to outwork decline. So like other people, they slow down, other people, they peter out. I'm not going to be like that. I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to go faster. I'm going to push myself more. But the reality is, human beings, we peak, and then we go down. And this isn't just in athletics. I mean, athletics, if you're in any of the explosive sports like sprinting and stuff, your peak is between 20 and 27. After that, you're decreasing. You're in decline. Endurance sports is a little bit later than that, but it still happens. And so sometimes we think, well, yeah, my job isn't to lift things, isn't to jump. My job is to think. My job is to apply my knowledge to problems and solve them. No matter what field of study we find ourselves in, no matter what field of work we find ourselves in, decline happens for every human being, not when we think it's going to happen. In fact, there was a survey in 2009 that asked Americans, what do you think, how old do you think you would be when you're getting old? Like, what do you think getting old means? And what age is getting old? And the average answer in 2009 was 85 years old. And that's what getting old is. You're old if you're 85, which is fascinating because the average age of death is 79. So most people will actually die before they get old. If they're dying 6 years before they actually consider themselves old. So this rate of decline happens so much sooner than we think. It happens actually between most of us, between our 30s and our 50s. That you would peak at 29 and actually decline between your 30s and your 50s, even in knowledge work. In fact, they've talked about this, that people who do research, that the massive number of Nobel Prize winners happen in their 30s. In fact, the likelihood of a person winning a Nobel Prize in their 70s is the same as it is winning the Nobel Prize at 20, which is roughly 0% chance of winning the Nobel Prize, 0% of having any kind of innovation or any kind of invention that late in life. In fact, this decline is so real that air traffic controllers, they have a mandatory retirement age of 56 years old. Because why? Because we're not going to keep you around because you're so good at your job. No, you used to be good at your job. You're no longer as good as you need to be because we need to keep these planes from hitting each other and crashing. Because the reality is every one of us declines. And so we started this series 4 weeks ago in the beginning of Easter. And the series is this Nunc Coepi. And the series is this notion of, okay, let's say this every single day, every single hour of each day. Now I begin. Like, now is the time. What happens when I say, now I begin, but I've lost my old strength? What happens when I say, now I begin, but I actually don't have the strength in me to keep moving forward? At least I don't have the old strength. How I say now I begin is, let's do the same thing over and over again. And it might be something like this. It might be more like Nunc Coepi, meaning begin again. And I say begin again by asking a new question. And that new question is, what does winning mean? Like in your life and my life. Because for those of us who strive, for those of us who are like, no, I want to be great. I want to make an impact. I want to do something great with my life. Okay, what does winning mean there? We could think like winning means, having that invention, having that innovation, making that impact. Maybe winning means making money. Maybe winning means like I bought a house, I own it myself. Whatever winning means, at some point, we have to redefine what winning means. And we have to, in some ways, embrace the full meaning of Nunc Coepi, which is not just now I begin, but also means let's begin again. It's now time to begin again. And this goes back to the scripture. Think about in the first reading, you have the Acts of the Apostles. And here's Peter, who has this revolutionary thought. It's a revolutionary revelation to him. Because if you go back to the Old Testament, you have God. What's he do? God chooses Israel as his own people. And even God even says, I didn't choose Israel because they're special. I didn't choose Israel because they're big, or because they're strong, or because they're smart, or because they're clever, or because they're better at all than other human beings. He said, I chose Israel as my own possession for 3 purposes. 1, I chose them so that they would have land. This is the promise. This promise God made to Abraham. He chose them so they would have a land. He chose them, secondly, that they would guarantee them a dynasty. But the third reason God chose the people of Israel, right, through Abraham, is he chose them because he said, through you, through this people, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, through you, the whole world will be blessed. And so we have this whole Old Testament of this entire story of God working with his people that he chose, and he gives them a land, and he gives them a dynasty. But the point isn't just they would have land. The point wasn't just that they would have a kingdom. The point was that because God chose this people, ultimately, it wasn't for their sake. It was for the world's sake. But think about if you're a Jewish person living in the first century. Think about if you were Peter in the first reading today. And you're realizing, okay, I'm Jewish. All my parents, grandparents, going all the way back as far as I can remember, they were Jewish, part of the chosen people. And everyone else is not part of the chosen people. Everyone else is on the outside. And then all of a sudden, in the revelation of Jesus, it's, okay, those who are on the outside, the point is to bring them inside. And so the thinking that Peter would have had, the thinking that those first Christians would have had, that was like, no, preserve our Jewish identity, had to be replaced by a different kind of thinking. What winning would have looked like as a Jew in the first century had to be replaced by a new vision of what winning would look like as a Christian in the first century. And again, this is true for all of us in so many ways, especially when we get to that second half of life, especially if you get to that part of life where we realize I'm in decline. We have to realize that the mindset that got me here, or like the attitude that got me here, the work that got me here, will not be the right kind of mindset that will get me there. That the work that I put in to get me to this part of the race might not be enough to get me to the finish of the race. And what God might be inviting us to do in that season is to not give up, but is to change our definition of winning. In fact, Arthur Brooks points this out. He points out that yes, invention and innovation, that's a young person's game. That when it comes down to starting companies, when it comes to inventing new products, when it comes to research breakthroughs, it's very rare that a person has a breakthrough like that after 40. And so that time is done. But Arthur Brooks points out that while innovation might be a young man's game, synthesizing and integration of knowledge is an old person's game. That in fact, that some of the best professors on campus in research, they're the young ones. But the best professors on campus who teach the best, those are the old ones. In fact, the part of our brain, or the part of our brain that synthesizes information and integrates information, the part of our brain that becomes wise actually increases with age, while the part of our brain that innovates decreases with age. And so what do we have to do? We have to switch our mindset. And this is the most important thing. It's so important for us to switch our mindset. Because sometimes we get so stuck in our mindset that we can't actually change. I came across a study recently that said that the average human being has 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts every day. Which is incredible. Think about your brain. 60 to 70,000 thoughts every single day. But they went on to say that 90% of those thoughts are the same thing, are the same thought. That even though our brains are constantly moving 60 to 70,000 thoughts every single day, 90% of them are about the same thing. And so no wonder in some ways we get stuck. No wonder in some ways we can just think like, no, this is the only way to look at a thing because that's the only way we've been looking at a thing, where I believe that God is calling us. No, actually begin again. Look at it differently. In fact, I saw this video recently. Maybe you guys have seen this too. It was a video of, they brought a bunch of adults into this like kind of interview looking space, sat them down and said, asked them one question. The question was, who would you love to have dinner with? Like, who would you love to sit down and have a meal with? And these adults were like, famous people. Like, I would love to have a meal with the president. I'd love to have a meal with this great author. I'd love to have a meal with Taylor Swift. I'd love to have a meal with like all these like famous people that they've never met in their entire lives. And then they escorted the parents out and then put the parents in a room where they could watch the interview space, and they invited their children in. And the kids their own kids sat down in those same chairs, and they asked those kids of those parents who are now watching this, who would you most want to have dinner with? And the answer kept coming back, my mom and my dad. I'd love to have dinner with my family. I would love to have dinner with my brothers and sisters. I'd love to have dinner with my grandma and grandpa. There was this radical way of changing things. When we hear that question, who'd you like to have dinner with? We think of someone who doesn't know us and doesn't care about us. But a new idea, a new vision of life, a new vision of winning could be actually, why wouldn't I choose to have dinner with the people who do care about me, the people who do love me, the people that I do know, the people that I actually do love? To actually move from an old strength to a new strength, to an old way of thinking to a new way of thinking. We ask the question like, well, how do you do that? How do you move from a strength to a strength? How do you move from an old way that doesn't seem to work anymore, why? Because it's in decline, to a new way? And I think maybe the secret is the secret of IT. What I mean, like the secret of IT is whenever you have a problem with your computer and you call IT, you guys know this, right? If you have a problem with your computer and you call IT, what's the first thing they say? Okay, one person just said this. Yeah, you turn it off and turn it back on again. That's all you have to do. Restart. Turn it off and turn it back on again. This is Nunc Coepi. Just begin again. To be able to have the sense of that realization of, okay, what has worked up till now won't work till then. What has got me to this place won't get me to heaven. And this is what Jesus is coming along. And he's coming along and he's saying what? I give you a new commandment. What's the new commandment? It's not simply be righteous. That's wonderful. That's good. It works. It gets you a certain distance. It's not simply obey the commandments, although that's very, very valuable. There's a new way. He actually says, if you want to win at life, you have to be like me. You have to love like I love. And this is what it is to when we experience ourselves in a place of decline, where it's like we try to fight and try to work, try even harder. That sense of like, I just need to be persistent. And the Lord says, actually, no. You need to be present. What I need to do, I say, I need to work harder. And God says, no, actually, I just need you to love well. I know you know that quote from St. John of the Cross, who had said so clearly, he said, at the twilight of our lives, we will be judged on love alone. For the Christian, what God has done is he stepped into our lives and he's given us a new vision for what winning is. A new vision for how do we move from an old strength that's on the decline to a new strength that will never decline. Because the reality, of course, is that every single one of us, we will never actually get that capacity to love taken away from us. There was this incredible young woman named Chiara Badano. Back in Italy in the 1980s, Chiara, I think she was 17 years old, and at one point, she was a high schooler, and she loved to dance, she loved tennis, she loved swimming, she loved to hang with her friends, she loved the Lord Jesus, and at one point when she was 17 years old, she was playing tennis, and she fell to the ground. They brought her to the hospital, and she spent the next, I think it was 2 years in this hospital bed, slowly with the parts of her body, her extremities, all the way to her core, becoming more and more paralyzed. At one point, she was offered pain medication, and Chiara Badano said, no, I want to give me as little pain medication as possible because I want to be able to unite my sufferings to the sufferings of Jesus. People would come to visit her thinking that they'd cheer her up, and they would leave themselves being cheered up. They would leave themselves being consoled. They came to give her a smile. She would give them a smile. And at the end of her life, here's Chiara Badano, who, again, as a young person, that old strength being taken completely away. Because we look at her youth and we're like, oh my gosh, even I just described her as someone who played tennis and she danced and she hung out with her friends and she was very active. And so we look at that and we think, oh, youth, life, what a great witness to the gospel. All of those things were taken away from her between the ages of 17 and 19. And she didn't try to cling to what was declining. She had a real vision, a new vision for what winning was. And her new vision was shaped by Jesus. That new vision is love. That's what she said. She said, I can't serve, and I can't sing, and I can't dance, and I can't run. I can't move. She said, but I still have my heart. And with that, I can always love. And this is true for every one of us. As we move from an old strength that's on the decline, in the second half of life where we realize there is a new strength that's needed, with the old vision of what winning is to a new vision of what winning is. The vision has to be this, has to be the vision of Chiara Badano, has to be the vision that Peter realized was replaced, the vision that Jesus gives us. And the vision is, no, I don't simply need to be persistent. I need to be present. I don't simply need to work hard. I am simply called to love well. This is the last thing. In the Catechism, it quotes, I think it's St. Gregory of Nazianzus, about this call to love like God loves, about this call to begin again, about this call to say, okay, winning for me, winning is looking like Jesus. Winning is loving like Jesus. And he said this, he said, he who climbs, meaning the one who's going after the Lord, he who climbs never stops going from beginning to beginning. Even if you and I find ourselves on the decline, even if you and I find ourselves like what used to work in the past doesn't work anymore, we can begin again. Because the one who climbs, the one who goes after the Lord, the one who strives after God, never stops going from beginning to beginning. That no matter where you are, no matter how much strength we have or don't have, we can, with all the saints, say, I know what winning truly is. Winning is looking like Jesus. Winning is loving like Jesus. And when I fail, I say, now I begin. And when my strength fails, I simply say, Nunc Coepi. Let's begin again.